better than two.
Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Sweet Home Catoosa. I'm your host, Richard Tharpe, and today, it is my privilege to welcome Judy O'Neal. Judy.
Thank you.
Oh, yeah. Listen, I guess you've been an inspiration for me. I mean, doing the podcast and talking to folks and all that, but really the inspiration was from UCTV and how you guys in your format talking and getting information to the community.
And you've been inspiration for us for doing your podcast and furnishing us with material that people are interested in and need to know. And thank you for that. Thanks for inviting me.
Oh, you're welcome. Well, I think you're such a vital piece of history for our area that I just felt like we needed to get you to come on and let's tell your story because, somebody like me, so I'm a great example. I'm a transplant, right? So I grew up in Tallahassee, Florida. I moved up in these parts in 2001. I've been in Catoosa County for 20 years, but I got to be honest, it was only 3-4 years ago that somebody told me, have you watched the local show? And I'm like, local show? Well, I watched 3 and 9 and 12. And they're like, no, the local show. And so I found out how to get it. And for us out here, it's channel 198, and I believe we're charter, if I'm not mistaken. So
that's what I've got at my house.
And then, of course, Facebook is another great way because, a lot of times I'll be at work in the morning and I'll have it on my phone through Facebook and listen. But, yeah, I had no idea, right? And so I thought, wow, that's brilliant because nobody talks about us in North Georgia unless something bad happens.
I got started I went to the cable company and I said, nobody talks about North Georgia. We're just left out of everything. If you give me the opportunity, I'll talk about North Georgia. On Monday morning, they did.
So, all right. And that's what I want to do today. I want you to take us back, and I want to kind of get the origin story, so to speak, of you and how this all transpired. And I know you've lived here your whole life.
All my life, all 85 of them.
Wow. So, what? You're a valuable piece of history to this area, Judy. You have seen so many things.
Thank you.
And so walk us through. So, how did you ever get the bug to even where did that start?
Well, I worked at a radio station, and they were going to have a gospel concert at Lakeview High School. And they wanted to promote it. And it was on Saturday night, so they wanted me to go and sit with one of the guys in the control room on Friday night out in Chickamauga at the cable company. That's where the head-in was down there. And I said, well, that's a lot of short notice. So they sat me down at a card table with this guy who became a co-host, my first co-host, with 2 telephones. And I said, nobody's going to call us. Nobody's watching us. Oh, the phone rang off the hook. And so I thought, I drove home to my house on a dirt road, and I thought, Monday morning, I'm going to go talk to them people and tell them, if you'll give me the opportunity to fill in some time there, I want to tell people what's going on in North Georgia because the need's there. I see it.
Right. Because
this was an unannounced show, and they were tuned in on the local channel. So they did. My first show was on Labor Day, and Harold Cook, who was the fire chief in Fort Oglethorpe, wanted to talk about the Labor Day barbecue. And that was my first show.
Wow.
And Bob Young, the guy that sat beside me, I invited him to be my co-host. He said, now, I can't stay. I don't want to do this. So I advertised that I needed a co-host. Write me a letter and tell me why you want to be my co-host and why you want to talk about North Georgia. So in the meantime, while I was looking for somebody, I went to my boss at WFLI and I said, I got a great idea. I want to work for you part-time, and I want that to be my full-time. Because there was so many people contacted me, and Richard, I started selling ads the next day.
Wow. Now, what year was that? Do you kind of remember, roughly?
Let me see. It was 1980, 182, somewhere in that area.
Holy smokes. So, yeah, even way back then, nobody was really talking about everybody here in North Georgia. It was still just Chattanooga-based. And you found a niche.
You know who I was on opposite in the morning from 7 to 9? David Carroll and Helen Harden. So I had them to write me another letter tell me why you watch us instead of David and Helen. Oh, the mailbox was full of letters. And so that way I gained some more people. And of course, David Carroll and our friends and Helen Hart and our friends. But anyway, they watched us because one of the first things I did, which was a no-no, on the telephone, I called Roy Parrish, who was commissioner of Walker County. Now, he knew my husband, knew him well, and he knew sort of about me. And I said, here, these people tell me you did so-and-so. I forget what the issue was. Yes, he said, I did. And why are you calling me? I said, why don't you tell these people why you did it? Oh, and I'm going, oh, my gosh, because he was part owner of the cable company. I found out. So he come to me and he said, you're tough and you're going to make it. And he said, something I need to do, the cable company does not carry, the service does not reach Lafayette. And we need to tie Lafayette in with that area up there. So he tied it in, and I got more viewers.
Wow.
And more advertisers.
Yeah. Good.
I mean, I was grinning from ear to ear. And so I barely worked over at WFLI, but I worked there a lot. And it was so much fun. I had so many guests. And Alvin Shipp was my co-host for, I guess, about 25 years. And he's the one that wrote the letter, and I picked him. He was a retired Marine, and he had a bookkeeping service. And it was Alvin and Judy. And we had a lot of fun.
So were you doing that? Because I know now you do a morning show, right, 7 to 9, and then you come back on at night and do night talk from 9 to 11. Were you doing that format back in those days, or was it just a morning show to start?
Let me tell you how that happened.
All right.
So we did the morning show, and somebody came in and took over the cable company. There were two cable companies, and Bill Cook, who just recently passed away, and one of the attorneys in Rossville had a little cable company, and so they wooed me over to them with my co-host, then was Roger Foltz. So I left Alvin behind, and he got a co-host named Judy. So there was no interference there. It was always Alvin and Judy. So I went up there and worked, and it was not, they didn't have the viewers, and they didn't have what they had. So they begged me to come back and do an evening show on Cable 12. It was Cable 12. And the cable company did away with 2 local cable stations. And they did away with 12. But before they did away with it, Alvin and Judy called me and said, hey, why don't you come over here and join us? I said, well, I don't know if I want to do that or not. And they said, well, come and talk to us. So Bill Wooten and I, who was my co-host, and we were doing night talk over there. So we went over there and did night talk. And that's how night talk got started. And I left them. So everybody kind of wooed me. But somewhere in between then, Alvin kind of got mad at me because I had a guest on. You remember the folks who was going to heaven in a spaceship?
Yes, yes.
Well, they were in Chattanooga. And I always looked for the most controversial thing I could find because people would watch controversy,
Right.
not sun shining outside. So they came out there. And so at the end of the show, the guy in the control room said, Alvin wants to talk to you before you leave. About what? I said. Well, he wants to talk to you. It was Friday night. He said, well, I've got some folks that advertise with us that said that if I didn't get rid of you, they wasn't going to advertise with us anymore. I said, well, who was that? Well, I won't tell you folks who it was. But anyway, they were religious on the other side. And these people were not exactly something that I would do, but they were a subject that people need to know about.
Right.
Because they read about them. So I was left without a job. I sat in a chair for about 2 days and didn't say a word. My husband said, somebody wants to talk to you on the phone. And I said, well, who is it? He said, that's the only thing I really ever said. I'm serious with you. He said, it's Mom Bowman. That was Lonnie Bowman's mother, who always made me a coconut cake every week. And she said, are you okay, Judy? I said, yeah, I guess so. She said, you don't worry about anything. LeBron was laid off, my husband. She said, we're going to get LeBron a job. And she said, we'll do what we can to help you. I've got you a cake. I said, well, good, I'll come and get it. One of my local advertisers, a grocery store, called me and said, the Lions Club has left us a gift card out here for you. Enough groceries to last me for a month. I said, are you kidding?
Wow.
So The next phone call was the lady from WFLI that I left to do that full time. And she said, Judy, I've got an opening up here from 9 to 11 for a show. I've got a guy doing it, and we're really not happy with what he does. Can you come to work for me Monday morning? I said, yes. She was in Cohutta, and that was Channel 53. And her station went everywhere. I had phone calls from Knoxville, from Atlanta, from Memphis, from every place. And she was going to let him go. I said, don't do that. I said, let him stay there with me because I don't know your ropes. So I saved his job, and I got a job. And I had to drive to Cohutta every night. Wasn't making very much money, but I was happy because I was doing what I love to do. And I was on opposite my show that I left.
Wow.
That was the ironic thing about it. So they were watching me and not watching that. So that went on for about a year. And one day I got a phone call from Alvin, and he said, Judy, I need to talk to you. I said, I don't want to talk to you. You cost me a lot. I nearly lost my house. I nearly lost my car. I wasn't making any money. And on Friday night, our night out, we'd go to the Crystal in Ringo. Everybody knows this story because I've told it before. Lamont and I shared a hamburger and a Coca-Cola, less than $1. And I remember those days. And I remember it when Jeff Mullich calls me chairman of the Green Party. I remember that. But anyway, he said, I want to come and talk to you. And I said, I don't know if my husband would want me to do that or not, but you'll do it on my turf. So he came, and he said, if you don't come back, we're going to lose the TV station. I said, well, I'm sorry.
Man.
You had me. He said, will you come back? I said, I don't know. I'll think about it. So I did go back. And they gave me from 6 to 7. Well, that's the news. I said, I don't know about that. He said, we'll give you time later on. And I said, well, I want it now. Well, I didn't get it now, but I went on the street, and guess what? I sold out 6 to 7 and went on, and everybody called me, and then I got my time back. That's about the end of that story, and I'm still there.
Yeah. So,
Only I bought them out.
well, yeah, and I saw that somewhere. That was like 2001 that you were able to buy the station now.
That's right.
What a dream come true that would be, right? I mean, in other words, you got to start and you got to go through all those different things. There's some tough times, but at the end of the day, you were able to buy your dream essentially, right? And for most folks, that doesn't happen, but for you, it did with all that hard work and those rough years. So I thought, wow, that's so, 23 years later, almost 24 now, here you are.
My husband looked at me and he said, you're crazy for doing that. I said, yep, but I'm going to make it go. And I did. And then a competitor opened up the street from me and said, I'm going to send her home. So a lawyer called me and he said, Judy, are you going to let them continue to talk to you about that, and say things about you? I said, well, while they're talking about me, I'm out here selling commercials and doing programming, so let them talk. I don't care.
What is it, do you think, that really just always resonated with folks and why they always just kind of gravitated to watching you? What is that people have told you just that made them like, you left and everything kind of goes down, the ratings go down? I mean, what is it about you that people just always couldn't get enough of watching Judy O'Neal?
Well, I think it's because I'm honest with them. I haven't been accused of that lately, not being honest, but I'm honest with them. And my goal, Richard, was this, to take a negative and turn it into a positive. And I'd say if we check that, I'm about 97% to do that. And I think they watch me because I dig in and hunt the news. If there's something going on in the community, I hunt to go to the bottom of it and tell them. Now, it may not be make some folks happy, but you need to know, and I'm going to tell you. And my thing is, if I know it, I'm going to tell you. I think that's why they watch me, because they want to know what's going on.
It's a true confession. There's times I turn the TV on, right, UCTV, and if you're not there co-hosting, whether it be morning or night, then I think, okay,
I hear that all the time.
It's just not the same. Does that make sense? It's not that the others don't do a good job. Don't get me wrong, but it's just not you, right? And you do bring that secret sauce, so to speak. because you do call it the way it is. But, the great thing about it is when you own it and it's yours, you take ownership of it, you just feel that freedom. They're like, hey, look, I'm just going to call it the way it is. You may not like it, but you deserve to hear it. And that's kind of the way in politics I kind of gravitate toward, because I've always been that way. It's like, look, if you ask me, I'll tell you. You may not like what I tell you, but you're going to get the honest. I'm not going to give you the answer I think you want to hear. You're going to get the answer that's an honest answer. And some people don't like that, but I think most folks want to hear that answer.
And with me, they do. But the little secret is this, that I'm just controversial as I can be on air, but I'm the best person to eat a hot dog with you ever seen.
Yeah. Yeah.
That part of me that people don't see.
Yeah. I grew up and my parents watched 60 Minutes every Sunday. And I used to love it. It kind of reminds me of you when Mike Wallace would come on and do his piece. Yes. Because, there was nothing like Mike Wallace showing up unannounced somewhere to do an interview with someone or just to do an interview, because you could tell they were extremely nervous because they knew he was going to ask the tough questions. He had done his homework and he was going to ask tough questions. And a lot of folks didn't necessarily want to have to be sitting there, but they knew they had to be. And he did a good interview because he asked the tough questions and he kind of just got it all out.
I do that too. I dig into it and find out, and I hunt the facts about it. And one time one of the elected officials said, she don't know what she's talking about. She don't know what she's talking about. So one of my friends called me and said, you need to go to the TV station. And I said, for what? She said, because somebody is saying things about you. So I went to the TV station and I sat there and looked at him. And when he finished his show, I said, come here just a minute. I want to show you something. You see this piece of paper? That's what I was talking about. Now, if you think I didn't know what I was talking about, there it is right there, and it come off of your desk. So he said, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to say that. I said, yes, you did. You want to discredit me. You always want to. But you don't have to do that anymore. And if you say anything else, I give you that time to talk. You won't be here next week because I'll take it away from you. Now, that's how I operate. And some people don't like that, and I'm sorry.
But did you have any kind of journalistic background before you got into TV?
Yeah.
And I think probably that would be where that came from, right? Because when you're a journalist and you're digging around and you're calling around or you're pulling papers and you're trying to get all the facts, and I think that's what sets you apart maybe from a lot of folks, because you've got that journalistic background where you're a bulldog. You're going to get to it and call, and what do you know, and who, does somebody else, and just you keep going down until you hit bottom, so to speak.
I worked for Catoosa County News when my son was born. They wanted somebody to write the church news, and I said, I can do that and bring it over there to you. So I did, and so they called me one day, and they said, you do such a good job. Would you come to work for us? And I said, doing what? And they said, we need somebody to cover Fort Oglethorpe. So they assigned me Fort Oglethorpe to cover all of the city council, all the meetings, and work up there. And I was very successful in that. Leonard Fant and I become very good friends. So Leonard Fant and the mayor of Rossville came to me one day and they said, you do such a good job. Why don't you start your own newspaper? Oh, I can't do that. Well, we're going to help you. That became Fort Ross Weekly. That was Fort Oglethorpe and Rossville Weekly.
Wow.
And I started out with a little tabloid size. Well, there was a busy shopper down the street. And there again, I turned it into, I had all kinds of ads. Red food store, double truck, they call it, in print, in paper, color, and all that. And then he bought me out because I was getting in on his money. So he bought me out. I left there and went to work for the Boy Scouts, editing the Boy Scout newspaper.
I'll be darned.
And I worked for them for 2 or 3 years. And then the city of Chickamauga called me. They had took their parking meters out, and they had a lot of politics going on. So they called me and wanted to know, will you come down here and start us a newspaper and work for the Merchants Association? I said, I don't know, I have to think about that. How much money are you going to pay me? Well, it wasn't as much as the Scouts, but I had a little free time and was doing something I wanted to do. So I went to work for them. And I stayed down there. They said, if you'll do a newspaper, we'll back it. In 6 months, we'll give it to you. Well, you know the rest of the story.
Yeah, unfortunately, yeah.
And I left there and went to work for Ted Turner at GOW.
Oh, wow.
And they called me and wanted to interview me. So I went over there and went to work for them. I worked for them for about 7 years and left there. I went to work. Went to WDEF, and I was chief accountant at WDEF. And Harry Thornton, I assigned him and Luther's paycheck. And so Harry said to me one day, when I was going to take that job, he said, honey, you don't want that job. He said, have you been upstairs and looked at the bookkeeping department? I said, well, actually not. But I said, they hired me. Ben Cagle was my boss. And they hired me, and I said, I think I'd probably like that. I went upstairs, and he was right. There was invoices laying on top of my desk that was 10 years old. But I cleaned it up. And so the wife of the manager of the TV station came in there one day. She said, my husband would bronze your shoes and put them on the mantle. I said, well, thank you. That's a compliment. But I cleaned that up and then went back to, I filled in for Harry Thornton when he first started with, not with Judy Corn, but Ruth from over in Flintstone. She was in Flintstone, and Ruth Lawyer. And that was an experience. And I tried to be his co-host. I tried out with 3 gals, and Miss Chattanooga girl got it. And she didn't have any television or radio experience. And me and Pam Boyer, I think, Pam Newby, me and that girl, she got it. So it was in my blood, and
Well, that's what it sounds like.
That's where I got. So I know all the rules about what the FCC says you can and you can't do in politics or on the air every day, and I don't have to go by the FCC rules. I just have a contract with the cable company. I have to do what they say. And it's nothing like downtown. But I follow those rules because that's the fair way to do it.
Well, I know it's always been that way with you. Like, you try to give equal airtime. So like when I was running, you're like, if we say Richard Tharpe's name, we need to say Alex Brady's name. Or in the primary, Vanita Hollander in the runoff or whatever. I mean, you've always been careful to that, to try to stay in the middle and be fair to everybody. And that could be hard. I mean,
it is hard.
I've seen, and a lot of folks, we all love, when you're driving down the road and you love to look at the trees, but boy, if there's an accident, everybody slows down and wants to take a good look, right? And yeah, I mean, there's been some accidents. There's been some controversy. There's been some strife between you and calls coming in. I mean, here recently in the election, there was one of those phone calls and you told it like it was, and then you got a phone call come in and, he didn't appreciate that and he was back and forth. But that's what folks watch for, right? Because we know you're going to tell it like it is. And then
what I'm going to do next.
Yeah. And then you're like, I've got it here to show you the proof, right, of what I'm saying is true. And folks don't like that. But folks, really what it is, they just don't like to look bad. And so it's like, well, if you just always do the right things, then that's not necessarily the case. And just this morning, you had a caller and it kind of got a little heated for just a couple seconds, and then that was over, right? But I mean, that's just part of it, right? You're going to have that.
He called me and apologized.
Exactly, right? But and see how that happens. But you've got that relationship with your callers. I mean, how did he know he could call? Well, he had your number, right? Because that's the relationship you have in our community. They're not just folks that call in haphazardly. A lot of them have your number and talk to you on a personal level too. You can't say that about much anything else in the area.
Well, my personal numbers are up on the screen. But there's something about that number being up on the screen. I go home at 5:30 to take a nap, feed my dogs, and I lay down and watch the evening news. Something about when I lay my head on that pillow, the phone rings.
I had that today. Yeah, I thought, man, I'm going to close my eyes for just a second here. And I had 4 phone calls in 10 minutes, right? And it never fails when you're trying to do that.
That's okay, because I belong to them.
Yeah.
24/7. And I want to tell you a little story, the most humbling thing that ever happened to me. And I've told this story on the air, and many of you people have heard it. I was in the grocery store one day a long time ago. And I speak to everybody or say something like, I really like that shirt you got on or something, have a good day or something. So this little lady was in a wheelchair and another lady was pushing her. And so I got this from my dad, I always make a point to say something to somebody like that. And I said, how you doing today, ma'am? And she said, is that Judy? And I said, yes, it is. And she said, you're my newspaper every day. The lady was blind. That was the most humbling thing of all my years that I think I've ever had, because I made her day, and that made me happy.
She looked forward to it, right? And like
Yeah,
she couldn't read a newspaper, but she could listen to you every day, and she would know what was going on inside the community. And for folks watching, I mean, if you have trouble finding it on cable, just go to Facebook and look up UCTV, and then just go to the Facebook page, and you can go back and watch them. And I'd advise folks, if you've never watched these segments, morning or night talk, watch a few. You'll understand the power that your station has on the local area.
It does have. And, you know, I had 2 stories that made national, international news. And that was the Sam Parker trial and the Marsh case.
Yeah. And, you know, I had moved to the area in 2001. So it was shortly after that, 2003, I believe, somewhere in there, where the Marsh case happened. And it's like, wow, are you kidding me that something like that happened? And it happened here in our local area.
Right.
Because it was national news. I mean, you know, because it was just so like, wow, I just can't believe that somebody would do those things and that would happen. So, yeah.
But CNN and Fox courted me one day because Marjorie Taylor Greene decided she'd go home. She wasn't going to sit there, so she said, I'm leaving. I said, wait a minute. No, she just kept on walking. So I thought that might get her beat, but I think that just boosted her up a little bit. Because,
you know, unfortunately,
because of me,
yeah,
boosted.
Unfortunately, in politics today, and I think that's a bad way for the younger generation to see, the ones that get the most coverage are the ones that act out the most, so to speak, right?
They do that because that gives them free publicity, free television time. They don't have to buy it. I wish people would understand that.
Yeah.
When they see Trump doing this and doing that, or Marjorie Taylor Greene, or anybody, there's Democrats do it too.
Colton Moore yesterday, right? You know, here it is. He was quoted in a national newspaper or on Fox TV or something. But anyway, it was because he wanted the death penalty in the case with Lincoln Riley, but it had already been decided before the trial that that wasn't going to be something they were going to pursue. But he had wrote and said, hey, it needs to be the death penalty, knowing that that would create eyeballs and all those types of things. And so, yeah, you see that, right? And you see it locally, you see it nationally, that it seems that sometimes folks just want to garner attention and not for the right reasons. There's a time to stand up and say, hey, I don't agree with this. And look, you know, this needs to change. And there's nothing wrong with that on a local level in getting that kind of attention or attention brought to an issue. Hey, we got a homelessness issue here, and we need to address it, and it's a big thing. Those things are okay because we're heightened awareness on issues that need to be. But I think a lot of times, here the younger generation, they see folks that, you know, they kind of act out and they get more eyeballs on them. And so they think, well, maybe that's just the way to get things done. And it's not necessarily the right way to get things done.
Yeah. You know something, though? People give me heck all the time and talk about me, call me names and so forth. And you know what? I go in the corner and grin. You know why? Because the next day somebody's going to say, where, how do you see her? I want to see what she's doing.
Yeah, yeah.
So you bring me an audience. So just keep talking. Just spell my name correctly if you write it down. And be sure and tell them where they can find me.
Well, yeah, because a lot of times you hear, right, it doesn't matter if you're talking good or bad, but you're talking about me, right?
That's right.
You know, so at least
that also happens in politics.
You don't say. It does.
You'll find that out.
Yeah, it does. Well, and listen, and we were just talking about this. So I was your co-host last night. Now, this will be about a week out. This will come out probably a little right after Thanksgiving area. But anyway, I was your co-host, and we were talking about a meeting and things that happened in that meeting, and we're talking about the commission meeting. And so anyway, we're talking about those things. And unfortunately, a normal commission meeting doesn't get a lot of attention, but when you have something go on that's kind of controversial, let's say, well, then more people talk about it, right? And so that's just a normal byproduct. And you've had a lot of things lately. I mean, the Rossville situation, whether it be the mayor or the ball field. So you had stuff going in Rossville, and we were talking about that. And I guess for me, it's educational too, because a lot of times we don't know the intricacies or how things work until there's something like that happens and it gets talked about, and we kind of get a little better understanding of things that maybe we should have already known about.
You and I should have known this last night, but we didn't know it. While we were on the air last night, the city of Rossville had standing room only in the Planning and Zoning Commission, because I got a phone call today and said, why didn't you talk about it? I said, nobody told me. They want to build a big apartment complex, where Kawasaki is and all of that hills up through there.
Yeah.
They wanting to build, and the Planning Commission, as I understand it, turned it down. So that's the next issue you're going to hear about on Monday morning as soon as I get the details.
Yeah, and I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, isn't it the same developer that was doing stuff down there by Ridgeland? So I think it may be the same developer, right? And
maybe, because they said he was from out of town.
Yeah, and so it's just, from what I understand, I heard it was the same developer, right? So here again, and then what do you have down there? You're fixing to have a change in commission, right? So, hopefully nothing gets pushed through the last minute, right? Because we talked about that last night too. And that happens nationally. We're actually a change in the presidential, change in parties, as leading the country. So you turn on the TV and hear, hey, they're trying to push this through at the last minute and the other. And that's gone on for years. That's nothing new. But those are the things that you talk about that people want to know about. And so Monday now, people are going to want to know what it is that you're going to talk about with that.
And they wouldn't have known that, or they would not have known it when I get to the bottom of it till I tell them. And because nobody announced that. Sometimes there's announcements and meetings that the elected people don't want people to know, so they don't tell us. But somehow or another, somebody calls me and we find it out and we show up.
Yeah,
I don't have enough staff to do what I have to do, because we don't have the finances to do that. But one thing I'd love to have is like a student from school that, some of the schools have television classes.
They do.
And somebody to do that. But they usually meet at night. And it's hard to get single people to go at night because they've got other things to do. Married people because their wife don't want them to go. But we do the best we can to find out.
Because you do, you show on your station, you show Walker County, Catoosa County, the Board of Commission meetings, you have County Hour.
And the school spotlight, we do the school spotlight during the day. Walker County's doing it right now, and I don't know why Catoosa County didn't come along, but they used to swap weeks and do it. And we're happy to salute children and students in school. And I don't want to go without saying that I have some of the greatest people in the world that help me, and they're all up on issues, and that would be Susan and Wanda and Richard. Not Richard. Rand. I got two Randys.
Two Randys. You do.
Richard Tharpe and Stephen Henry's back.
Yeah.
And I got took to task about Stephen Henry, but I stood my stance, and Wednesday night sort of belongs to him.
Well, didn't he, when he was chairman last time, he came on and a lot of times he would come do the Catoosa County Government Hour and talk about things in government?
He showed up every time for Catoosa County Government Hour, whether he had anything to talk about or not. He sat there and he brought announcements, and he did a good job. And he did that every week that I can think of. And I appreciate that, because I think that's important, that elected officials show up.
Yes.
And if they don't show up, people say, what's going on with them? And I understand that, because I think so too.
Well, yeah, and we talked about that. I think, and I've said this all along, as an elected official, you need to be active and participate. Whether, like for me, I'm going to go to planning and zoning meetings. I want to hear the zoning cases before I ever get to see them on a commission. You need to be active in what's going on, and you need to, the agenda packet, and this gets talked about as commissioners, the agenda packet comes out on a Friday, and they're going to have the meeting on Tuesday. you take it for granted that everybody's going to take that information and they're going to go through it, and then they're going to ask maybe, well, I need a little more clarification here, or what that, but so that's what you expect, right? And so you give them also an outlet to come on, like you were talking about with Stephen Henry. And I saw the chairman from Walker County, Shannon Whitfield, was on there doing the government hour last night when I turned it on. And so he comes and does that to talk about, here's what's coming up, here's the things going on. I think that's important. People need to understand.
I think when people run for office, here's something they need to understand, that they belong to the people 24/7. You need to be able to communicate. And I've had them say, well, I don't want to come on there because will you not take phone calls? No. The phone line's open for anybody to call. And if you can't answer the telephone and you can't sit there and you can't show up and do that, then you don't need to be elected. There's another Judy. You don't need to be elected if you can't do that.
No, I totally disagree with that. I mean, if you can't, everybody, and I told somebody the other day, nobody has a problem giving good news. If I have good news to tell somebody, like if I interviewed 4 applicants, it's easy to call the one that got the job, congratulations, you got the job.
Right.
The harder phone calls are the other 3 that you've got to call and say, I'm sorry, we're not choosing you at this time, and here's some of the reasons and things, maybe you can work on down. But those calls are hard. Nobody wants to give bad news. Everybody loves to get good news. But if you're going to be in a position, you've got to do those things. Those are the tough things that separate real leaders from not real leaders.
Right. You're right.
So
you're exactly right.
And I know another thing you do on your station, Sheriff Talk. Walker County with, Steve Wilson and Gary Sisk from here in Catoosa County come on your station, open up the phone lines, and they talk about things going on in the community and things, and they take phone calls from the citizens. There's a lot of great things that your station does to get information to the community here in Northwest Georgia.
The anchor shows for UCTV are Senior Moments, Swap Shop, Sheriff Talk, Walker County, Catoosa County Government, and Night Talk in the Morning Show, and the Gaithers. Those are the anchor shows, and everything else evolves around them. And we have some wrestlers, and people buy time, if they want to buy an hour or whatever, and they do that. But those things, and I've been copied with those by another local TV station in another area, but they don't come up to what we've got.
Talk about Swap Shop real quick, because I think that's a unique thing. I know now with social media and all that, it kind of changes things a little bit, but I thought that was how did that come about?
Well, before I owned the TV station, they had Swap Shop, and a little guy by the name of Bubba did it, and it caught on. He said one time, I want to tell these people about how they can buy something, and that's how it got started. And then it just kept on. We had one, Frank Elder and Polly. They were husband and wife. Many people remember them. And if I may say this little probably, maybe not, but.
Go ahead, no.
When he sold advertising on there, he was on there for 2 hours, and then he came back and did it in the afternoon for an hour. And when he sold, he worked for commission only. And there was not a week went by that I didn't write check to Frank and Polly for at least $1,200. I'm talking about a week. So when you think about that, you think about the ads that he had, because actually Swap Shop's nothing but advertising, but not advertisers. But you want to sell your car,
right.
I want to sell my elephant, I want to sell a couch or something like that. And people, they use that for a way to make them some money, and I appreciate that. We've had several Swap Shop hosts. It's hard to find somebody because it's at the wrong time of the day, because if they work, they can't do it.
Right.
And there's lots of different reasons. Right now we have a little gal named Angela Pence that's doing it, and she was Colton Moore's opposition.
She was, yeah. Well, and now
She's got a great voice.
She does with Facebook Market, or Facebook period, I should say. When you go to UCTV, even if they can't catch it, they can come back and rewatch it when they get home later. And, she's telling everybody the phone number and all that. So you still have an opportunity. But it was funny to me a while back, you were in between hosts. Somebody, the gentleman had left. And before you had Angela, And I can't tell you how many times I would be watching and people call and say, when's Swap Shop coming back? That tells you how much people really enjoyed it when you had folks calling in and go, well, when's that coming back? Well, when's it coming on again? You know, so yeah, that was
But you know,
pretty.
people in Chattanooga in their offices and riding down the road, they'll call her and sell something or buy something. It's amazing the audience that Swap Shop has.
It is.
It's amazing.
But it's pretty unique. But yeah, that's just one of those unique shows that you have.
Something else something else we had one time, and I know a gal. It's her name's Angela that we talked about. Angie that we talked about helping us out with this. Girl Talk is one of the funniest and best shows that we ever did. What we did is we had 4 girls, and they rotated, and then we'd invite somebody like from, say, Kim Chapman from Channel 9, or somebody from Dalton, you know, personalities. And we just talk girl talk, just things that women talk about, dresses and health and this and that. And always got a laugh out of it. And we did away with that because it got to me, it was just really stressful that I'd come one week and, you know, another week. But we invite different people to do that. We're going to try to do that again because Rhonda and Amy from down at Post General Store, we talked about doing that. I hope to do that. So we need some niche shows. We haven't had any niche shows lately, and we need to do that. Because in wintertime, people watch more television than they do in the summer.
Oh, yeah. Well, as you can see today, the wind's blowing today, and it's where this cold front's finally come through. And, I was looking at the long-range forecast. Thanksgiving, it's going to rain, but the day after Thanksgiving, the lows are in the 20s and the highs 45. So winter's here. So you're right. Yeah, I'm not out mowing the yard or doing whatever, and everybody's home a little bit more, and they can catch up on their phone or on TV. So yeah.
Something we really do best, Richard, is we cook and we talk about what we're going to eat. For some reason, we haven't got a guess. We always veer off on what we're going to eat and give recipes. And something else we do. People call in and they can't find somebody. They've lost their dog. One time somebody lost a pig. One time somebody down in Keith, their cows got out and they couldn't find their cows and different things. But one of the most memorable things that I remember, these people were coming through town. They were tourists, and they was in Walmart. Now, Walmart used to be down where
Tractor Supply? Is that?
Across from Lakeview High School.
Across from Lakeview,
Yeah, they
Tractor
used to be
Supply,
there.
right there. Yeah,
Yeah, they used to be
Hamrick's
there.
is there, I believe.
Yeah,
now.
Hamrick's is there. And so this lady had her jewelry in a paper sack, and she lost it in Walmart. And this was in between 9 and 9:30 hour, and she called in, and she was staying at a local motel, and she said, if anybody's found it, I wish I could find it. If I'm lying, I'm dying. By 10 o'clock, that woman had her diamond rings.
Wow.
Because somebody was watching us, and they were honest enough to give it to her. And I was so happy. Oh, that woman couldn't thank me enough. And she was just passing through town.
That is the power of local television, so to speak, right? In this area where there's been such a vacuum, and you fill that vacuum, we do it. And that's why I started this. You know, I just felt like there was a way to get folks to come on like you. There's people that may not, like me, that don't know about UCTV and Judy O'Neal. And, you know, because they moved here. They didn't grow up here. You know, anybody grew up around here, those are the people always talk about how long and the things and UCTV and all that. But somebody that moves from out of town in here and doesn't know the history, they don't know about your show, right? And that's this kind of goes through Facebook and YouTube and other areas, and you run it on UCTV, but it's another way to get information out. So I'm hoping folks watching today are like, she's an interesting person. I'd like to see some more of Judy O'Neal and go back and start and then become an active viewer.
You know, you were there last night, and the guy from West Virginia that calls us, he calls us nearly every night. There's a lady down around Macon that's on the city council.
She calls regularly.
She calls us. She's from Lafayette. And people call all the time that used to live here, and we keep them up on the news of what's going on in the area.
Back in your hometown.
Yeah.
Yeah, they still want a piece of that. There was somebody, I think, and it's on Facebook, but they lived here and now they live in Alaska, of all places. But they keep track of everything that goes on back here, and they'll kind of comment on that because it's always home, right? You may move away, but it's always home. And so you're right. They'll still listen to your show to keep up with what's going on back home.
When you said Alaska, it reminds me of something. The little guys that work for us part-time have worked their way through college. Listen to this story. One of them, his name's Rocky. He is now a professor at Northwest College. Ronnie Bradford is the principal at Heritage High School. Mike Johnson was the superintendent of the state of Alaska.
Wow.
And it was one more, I've left somebody out, but, Cable Perry, Brian Perry's son,
Yes.
is the coach and teacher at Lafayette High School. So for all those guys that I've had working for me, they paid their way through college there at UCTV, and then they got a job in education. That's amazing, really.
Well, it's a sense of pride too, right? Because, you help those folks to the next step in their life, and they've got memories there with you that they will never forget.
Kennedy, Rick, that's in the control room, he's the operations manager. Rick's been with me for going on 24 years, and Rick and I have never had a crossword.
Wow.
That's amazing.
So basically, that was around the same time you bought it. I mean, he's been there.
No, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding.
Well, and it was a unique experience. So I'd watched your show and all that. And then, when I started running for office, I had to come down there and, you gave everybody 30 minutes to come on in the morning show and at night. And it was pretty surreal to walk into a studio where, you're kind of getting that behind the scenes tour. So it was kind of neat, because you walk in and you're like, wow, okay, so this is the behind the scenes thing. And so it's unique, and it's right down there in Fort Oglethorpe. It's just, and it's like right now too, what you do in the community doesn't get talked about a lot, but like you're doing the supermarket sweep, right now, because you're raising money for Stocking Full of Love here in Catoosa County. And so those are also the things here locally that you do, things like that help our local community. And those are just wonderful things that you do there. And I know you've probably got some fundraisers you could talk about for days that you've done through the years.
Yeah. We've done something different every year for Stockings Full of Love for 37 years. And the most money they ever raised came from a roast. They did a roast on me, over $14,000.
Wow.
Right. And it was very amusing. Ken Poston,
Yep.
when he was elected to, was he senator, Congress? Which one was he?
Well, he was in the House, State House.
He was a delegate
Okay.
from the House. So he went to the convention, and so he knows that I love Ted Kennedy. Well, he had Ted Kennedy, and he had another famous elected official, and then I think a governor there with him. And so he said, we're going to call in and talk to Judy. She's on the air. And he told me, he said, tonight I'm going to call you about 9:30. And so if you see my number on there, let me through. So he couldn't get through because the lines was busy. So he calls the control room, and the guy in the control room said, I can't patch you in there right now. She's talking to the school superintendent. I'm going, oh my gosh, I could have talked to Ted Kennedy.
Wow.
So Ken told that at my roast.
Yeah.
Yeah, he told that at the roast. So that was really funny.
Yeah, he came on here. He was, I think, our second or third guest on Sweet Home Catoosa, coming in and talk about his book that he has out, Zenith Man. Here again, local history in the area and things like that, because Ken, I live right here in Graysville, and he grew up in Graysville, and he's got a rich history of the county as well, just like you. It's folks like y'all that we need to talk to, so folks here can understand the history of what we have.
When Ken graduated from college, him and Greg Bentley came and sat on the morning show set when I was at the local 12, came and watched us do the show, and then we'd go to some kind of event or something, or go to breakfast. And that's how I got acquainted. Of course, Ken Poston's sister Nancy and I were friends, so we were real good friends. And every time I go through Graceville, I look over that brown store, and I think about him because he held his press conference there when he was running against Nathan Deal.
Yeah. He talks about that, when he ran. Yeah. he ran for House of Representatives there in Washington, and he said he got soundly beat. But who would have thought? But part of the history, like he said, right down the road.
If I had the biggest mistake I ever made was the first day I went on the air. If I hadn't started me a journal, I'd have a best-selling book because I'd tell all.
Well, yeah, it's just funny. And so, yes, when you have a journal, it's always neat, and I still don't have one, but 20 years ago, what you did on this day 20 years ago on this date in that calendar year, if you read that now, you'd be like, I don't remember that. But then all of a sudden, there's sometimes you'd be like, I do remember that. But, you can't put, it's just so much you can hold in there. That's why I'm always fascinated with people who have a photographic memory. It's like, that amazes me. It's like, how can you store that much information up there and remember everything like that? But yes, a journal would be.
Bobby Lee Cook's daughter, Christina Graham, Christina Graham, Cook Graham, judge. When she ran for office the very first time, I called her and asked her would she come and be on, and she said, I can't do that. She said, I'd be scared to death. I can't do that. I said, yes, you can. Come on, it's just like sitting at the breakfast table talking. So she came, and she was okay. She called me back. She said, that was so much fun. Can I come back?
It is. Yeah. And that's what I tell people when they come on here. I'm like, look, we're just having a conversation, and I say, hey, look, if you're going to talk to the audience, just look in the camera. And most of the time we're going to talk to each other, and everybody's kind of sitting around listening to our conversation. Yeah. There's folks that can do that and are comfortable with it. And then there's some folks that just like, I don't feel comfortable with it. But it's like, there's nothing to it. We're just talking like we normally do.
And, most every election I find a co-host. And one of them this year is you. And Richard said he'll come and help me anytime I want to. So
Absolutely.
I always enjoy him because he's well-versed. He talks where you can understand him, and he's up on the issues. So those things that I like about you. And congratulations on your win. I look forward to working with you.
Oh, thank you.
Make sure you cross all your I's and dot all your T's.
Yeah, I know, girl. You'll be up there talking about something I did wrong. And I've told people that. I'm like, look, if you get into politics, there's going to be time, just like we talked about last night. There's going to be things you do that you make a mistake on, right?
All right.
The biggest thing with mistakes, and this way in life, is just own up to them, apologize. What are you going to do to not do it again, and move on, right? And people appreciate that. It's the folks that just have a problem admitting when they're wrong that just, I think, rubs people the wrong way, because we all make mistakes. I'm sure you could sit here and recount several times. You're like, I wish I hadn't have done this or done that, or, I said this on air, maybe I shouldn't have. But it's okay. But one thing about it is you'll come back, and I've seen you do that. Say, yeah, I probably, I owe them an apology or whatever. And that's all people want. People just want, hey, let's just move on, move past.
If I was
but
wrong,
admit
I
it.
will do that. If I was wrong. And if I always try to know what I'm talking about and have something in print. So if I've said something, somebody call in and said, that's not what you said. They say, oh, well, here it is.
Yeah.
Look at it.
Well, and you're really good at, if you had somebody that wanted to come on and talk, and they were wanting to talk about someone else and something that was going on, you're like, listen, I'm going to give that other person equal airtime too. I want them to come on and tell their side of the story.
Exactly.
But that's where people love to watch, right? Because they get to see both sides, and they get to see you talk to them. Because I think most folks know that if they come on your show and there's something controversial, it's not a softball in there. You're going to throw the high heat. You're going to throw them the hard questions and be like, well, that's not what I heard. What is this? And but that's what makes it so interesting for folks to watch, because they do want to know what's going on locally, the good, like stock and full of love, or the controversy, like you said last night with the zoning meeting. But those are all things as citizens, you didn't know about it last night. I didn't know about it last night. Now, I don't live in Rossville, but it still impacts our area. And so there's a lot of your viewers that are going to be like, and we didn't either, but we count on Judy O'Neal to tell us about those things.
And Judy will. I do the best I can, because I love what I do. And every day somebody says, when are you going to retire? I said, never. Dr. Ireland says that I'll die doing a commercial. I said, boy, what a way to go.
But it's not really a job, is it? In the sense that you're just talking to folks every day for a few hours on air, just talking about things and talking with your co-host. And you had the zoo in the other night I saw, and you had Smokey the Bear come in and the fire air, coming in and talk about fire risk and things here, the holiday season and all those things. And so people call you and say, we want to come on.
I was going to tell you that I don't have to look for a lot of guests. They call me. But if I see something I think is controversial or something that people need to know about, I'll hunt them. And it's something I love. The hard thing that I do, the hardest part of my job is when the alarm clock goes off at 5:30. I'm thinking, oh no. So after I get up, fix my coffee and feed my dogs, I'm okay. And then coming home and taking my nap and going back. And the girl, my decorator at my house, was in my closet one day. She said, "You've got more tops than anybody I've ever seen." I said, "Look, that's all anybody ever sees of me is the top and earrings. They don't ever see the pants I got on," which brings me to a funny thing that David Carroll, when I did my roast, I was reminded of this by somebody the other day, that David got up and walked back from the news. He had on his boxer shorts and a tie and a blazer and a shirt. We don't go that far, but Randy Camp, he wears shorts every day. And we all you see is up here.
Right.
So we really don't care. If somebody came there, it's really important, though. I'd try to look a little bit better.
Listen, I just appreciate what you do, first of all.
Well, thank you.
For the community. And here again, if you're watching this and you haven't tuned in, you're missing out. You really are. It's great for local information. It's great things that you do, and it's great information for things that are really going on in the community that people need to pay more attention to, and getting to know a lot of folks that maybe you don't know in the community, because you have on, political leaders or just folks that run important businesses in our community, and you try to help small businesses come in and you give them time. You're like me. You had several nonprofits come in to talk about their nonprofits and what they do in the community and how they need help. I mean, it's just such a great way to get information in the community. So thank you for that.
Something I'd like to spread out and get into the area is in Dalton, because there's a lot of things in Dalton. I always wanted to have Scott Chitwood on Sheriff Talk. I think they had him once, but if I could have included him in Sheriff Talk, after so many, I think it was 32 years, and he got beat by his opponent.
Just this time, yes.
What great service he did. And he was the sheriff of Whitfield County.
Yeah. There's always a need. Luckily in our community, we're trying to fill that need. But I think there's definitely, like you said, Whitfield County, there's communities that still have a void there. And, I'm sure they'll work to try to fill that. But thank you for coming today. Thank you so much.
Thank you for spotlighting me. I appreciate that. And for helping me to get folks to watch us. And I love everybody, and I don't plan to retire. But when I do, I always laugh and tell them, when you go to the funeral home, here's what I told them to put on the casket. She's finally shut her mouth.
I think that's a great way to end it. Well, thank you, Judy. And
Thank you.
Thanks for everybody watching. And until next time, have a great week.